And that has just haunted me since 1997. But then to have people say that I was the person responsible for his disappearance and for whatever ended up happening to him, it's like they don't have any idea what was going on in our lives to have said that.
So I'm going to start off the way I start them all off with, if you could finish the phrase, if you really knew me, you would know. And if you can just start that sentence, and then I just want to hear what comes to your heart. If you really knew me, you would know.
If you really knew me, you would know that I'm a hermit by nature. I would be perfectly happy living on a deserted island all by myself for all of eternity. I just don't have any desire to be around other people or have any kind of connection to people. And I would be just perfectly happy in that kind of environment. It's like my retirement dream would be to move so far away that I never saw another person again. And my daughter has that same desire, so I think it must be genetic.
It's so funny that you say that, especially with what we all went through last year, and now we're still going through it with COVID. So while a lot of people would probably be saying, "Oh, I don't get to connect with people. My plans are shot. I can't go out anymore." Did you find it as some sort of a blessing in your life? Did you find yourself saying like, "Oh my gosh, I have no pressure to go out"?
Best year ever.
No way.
It's like I can stay home and I am perfectly legitimate to do that. I can go out in public and put a mask over my face so that I don't have to interact with people. It was like, oh, this is me. This is my life.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. And you know what? I have so many people in my family have all said that like there's some sort of silver lining to it. You get to know who you are better. You get to be with yourself and find out what really brings you joy. And I'm sure that you were with your husband during these times, and he probably doesn't fall into that category. Because I know he doesn't. So,
like a professional friend. He just loves being with people. Oh my gosh, he loves people.
Well, it's the opposites attract, right? I'm in that same relationship too. Like I could be out every day doing things, and my husband is more like you in that way, but it's a perfect partnership. You bring out the best in each other. So now that we're talking about last year, I know that you know that we're going to go here. But while you were home, and while so many people were home and sitting at their TVs and watching, I know it's not offense to you when I say a train wreck of a show that captured so many people's attention. Do you remember the moment where you were like, what did I get myself into? What did I just get swindled into? Do you remember those feelings? What were they? Was it anger? Was it betrayal? Was it screaming at the TV? What was it like?
My husband and I were so shocked because we had been told that this was going to be the Blackfish for big cats, and it was going to be all about exposing the abuse these cats go through. And so we sat there and binge watched it like everyone else because the trailers didn't look anything like what we were told this was going to be. And we had the benefit of the previous year in August before Tiger King came out. Tiger King came out in March of 2020, but in August of 2019, Wondery had put out a podcast called Joe Exotic or something to that nature. And what that reporter had done was he wanted the viewer or the listener to go through the same experience he did. So he was really taken in by these charismatic people that were exploiting animals who were saying that I was their enemy and thinking that, I was being unfair to them in some way by wanting them to stop the cub handling. And so he said he bought it, hook, line, and sinker, until he started actually doing some research. And then he discovered that everything that I was saying was true. And everything these people were saying about me was either totally fabricated or just, myth. And at the end of his podcast, he said, this is the path I went on. I wanted you to go on the same path I did, but here's the truth about the matter. So as we sat through Tiger King, 7 episodes into it, we're thinking, well, surely at some point they're going to get around to the point where they say, but here's what we found out to be the truth. And they never got there. And so my husband and I were sitting there on the couch looking at each other. It's like, all right, well, that was the last one. It's over. That was a missed opportunity. And that's all that we thought was, like, geez, we just wasted 5 years with these people and they didn't get out there the important information about how these cats are suffering and how this is causing the extinction of the cats in the wild. And that was our main takeaway. There was no throwing a shoe at the TV or anything. I mean, they had said some nasty things. They didn't recant them. But the main thing to us was they did wrong by the cats that we were trying so hard to protect. It wasn't until my phone almost immediately started ringing and rang off the hook for months with people screaming obscenities at me and saying they wanted to burn the place to the ground and that it was no better than these people that were abusing these animals and saying that our cats were in tiny cages. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, our smallest cage for a cat that's 20 pounds, about the size of a house cat. One cat, their cage is 1,200 square feet. My house isn't 1,200 square feet. But as I looked at Tiger King, it's like, you know what? They just did like me standing in front of the feeding lockouts on all these cages. So I guess that is what people thought. So it was kind of a slow awakening for me as to why on earth is everybody so upset? What got them so angry? And then I watched it again and again, and it was like, well, now I see why people came away with those kinds of misconceptions about the whole industry, one, and about me personally. And so I created that page at bigcatrescue.org/Netflix where I said, well, when you were seeing this on the screen, here was all of the evidence behind that if you had been shown that, you would know better. But you didn't get to see that because the producers didn't present you with all of that evidence. And people just, for the most part, don't care. And I don't blame them. They were just being entertained. They don't care that their perception of me or the industry is wrong. And I think even if they do care, once you have been part of all of those really hateful memes and you've stated on your social platforms, how much you hate Carole Baskin and you want to free Joe Exotic and all of the stupid things that people said, it takes a really big person, I think, somebody that's really self-assured to be able to go back and say, I was wrong. And so some people did, but it's, very, very small minority of the 64 million people that saw Tiger King. So, from that perspective, it really doesn't matter what people think about me. The whole mission for the last year has been to try and capitalize on the fact that at least people know about this situation now and to bring to light all of the things that Tiger King left out as far as how these cats are treated and what we can do to end the abuse. And I've seen, it came in like a really big, powerful wave of hate, but just like a wave, it goes out slowly and it recedes more slowly. But as it has, it's been amazing to see the people that have come forward saying, wow, I was so misled by that. I was so drawn in by that narrative and I believed all of those things. And then when I stopped and thought, wait a minute, here's one person trying to end the abuse. Why is she the villain? Then I think it has been very helpful to our mission, which is ending the abuse of these cats and saving them in the wild.
My heart is racing for you because I know if I were in that situation, you probably wouldn't be able to peel me out of bed. I would be in a victim mentality. How could they be feeling this way about me? Don't they know? And then also the anger and regret and thought process of I've just spent 5 years with these people and this is how they portrayed me. There had to have been. I mean, I'm thinking in human nature, there had to have been a moment where you said to yourself or your husband, why me? Why is this happening? You didn't, there wasn't a moment where you just let it all go and said, this is BS.
No, there was never like any crying fit or anything like that over what they did. What I did wonder is why they chose to do this, because they could have had just as compelling a story. I mean, all of the crazy people that they featured in that, they are really a bunch of freaking crazy people doing crazy things. They could have had all of that and still said, and here's this one person who has told them, you can't treat animals like that on my watch, and I'm going to do something about it. I think that would have been just as saleable as a show. I don't know what the driver was to try and take the one person who was trying to protect animals and make that person the villain. That just didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense from a storyline. You know, if you were even just making up a fictional story, why would you do that?
You still don't know?
I don't.
Because as you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, why? Because all of these nutcases would have made their own show just choose one. Just choose one instead of the lady that actually was trying to bring awareness to the fact, has a beautiful sanctuary garden place, made her life's purpose saving these cats. It's just, it makes no sense. And if they haven't apologized to you, I'll apologize to you. And on behalf of all the people that you've touched lately, when you're speaking your story, and the second someone gets one-on-one time with you, it's like, wow, I bought into the media. Why? And it makes us feel stupid. I'm saying us, like just people in general. And I want to go back to where you said that your husband is like a professional friend, and I'm sure he's your best friend. I know how I get when someone hurts me, and you roll with the punches. It's like, okay. But if someone hurts someone I love, let's say someone said something bad about my husband, I would be a lion. I would want to rip their face off. So that's something I always wondered, because I see the close relationship you have with your husband. How did he react to the rumors? How did he react to your reputation being tarnished?
Well, it wasn't just my husband. It was my husband and my daughter and my mother and my brother and, you know, all of my family and friends. All of those people, I think, took it a lot harder than I did for the reason you just stated. You know, if you're saying that stuff against me, I know who I am. You telling me that I'm somebody else, that doesn't make me somebody else. So I don't take it personally. But I can understand if somebody were saying the kinds of things that were being said about me, about my mother, or if they were saying it about my daughter or my husband, yeah, those then are fighting words. And there's that, you just like, bow up, like you said, like a lion, like I'm going to get in the middle of that and I'm going to protect that person, even though they don't need my protection any more than I need their protection. But you just have that protective nature for the people that you love. And so for me, that's been the roughest part of all of this, is seeing how they have struggled with it. And, you know, my husband's 11 years older than I am, and he's, you know, got the wisdom of years behind him. But for my daughter, for her to see this and she's never actually even seen the show. She's just seen all of the memes on social media since then. And for her to see that and come away from that thinking, I will never trust anyone. That's just painful to me, that it has ruined her belief in people because she's seen the way that I've been treated. And so the only thing that I can do, I think, to help her with that is show her that, hey, it's no big deal. It's just the way people are, and they're doing the best they can, and don't take it personally and just roll with it. So I'm hoping that over time she will come to trust more than she does now.
Speaking of your daughter, did she get any backlash from this?
Yes.
Oh my God.
You know, what's been weird is, well, maybe not so weird. What's been interesting is that people who can hide behind a social media handle or behind a, what do you call it when you like hide your phone number, an alias or a burner phone?
Cowards.
Those people have been horrid. But people in person have been just lovely. And everybody who has approached me in person has been so kind. And that's been true for all of our people here at the sanctuary, our family. You know, whenever they meet people, they're always like starstruck that they were involved in Tiger King. And they're just, you know, wanting selfies with them and wanting to talk to them and find out more about the cats. And so it's all been in person, a really nice experience. But where Jamie, my daughter, has suffered the most is that during that period of time when people were calling my phone every 2 minutes, we are the only place in the state of Florida that will go anywhere in the state of Florida, any time of day or night. If a bobcat's been hit by a car or shot by a hunter, we're going to go there, catch that cat, get it the medical care it needs, and then rehab it for release back to the wild. I had to turn my phone off for 3 months, and it was 3 of the months that are most prone to those kinds of calls, because it's the spring and summer when mother cats are trying to take care of their kittens and they're having to go further in order to provide for them, and they're getting hit by cars, and then you've got orphaned kittens. I couldn't take any of those calls, and because I had to be able to sleep at night, I had to turn my phone off. So as a result, my daughter forwarded the phone to her, and she had the same problem. She couldn't answer the phone without people just screaming obscenities at her and waking her up at all hours of the night. And a lot of the people thought it was just hilarious to call us and say that they had just seen a bobcat that had been hit by a car out in the middle of freaking nowhere, and try to get us to go to a scene of something that didn't happen. And I just, they'd break into laughter, and you could tell they were drunk. And I don't know what goes through a person's mind that they would be so vicious and so vile, but I have discovered that there are a lot of really wretched people on this planet. I never had any clue that there were that many people until I started getting those calls.
It scares me. And I can't, first of all, I can't imagine, and I'm so sorry that having as a mother to watch your daughter go through that so unnecessarily, so viciously, and having her see really, like you said, the how disgusting people can be. And it reminds me of something I heard you say once that I really took to heart in the story that you just said about people calling you to go to a scene that never happened. You were speaking about how you were I don't know if it's you still are, or that you were fearful when you left your house if someone was going to hurt you. And that's a really good example. Can you talk about those feelings active still? What were those feelings?
Well, that's been my experience for the past 20 some odd years. When we started in 1992, we didn't know what we were doing, and we were part of the problem until about 1997. But by 97, 98 was when we started spaying and neutering all of the cats, and we started working for federal bills that would ban the private possession of them. And that was when all of these people who were exploiting cats really came to hate me. And so I've had so many people over the years in that industry threaten to kill me and threaten to rape me and break my legs and do anything they could do to silence me. And knowing that there is this element of people who are so vicious that, anybody who would abuse these tiger cubs the way these people do for these pay-to-play schemes clearly has no care for human life or any other kind of life. And every time I get a call to go out in the middle of the night, and it seems like bobcat calls are always in the middle of the night, there's always that fear of, even though we require that they send us a photograph of the cat so that we can try to determine whether or not there really is a cat there. And, we try to listen to the way they're talking, and yet sometimes they really are drunk. That's how they hit the cat. They were drunk in the first place. So you can't just blow them off just because they're drunk. So it's always a scary thing to go out in the middle of the night to some remote area. And typically my daughter and I and her boyfriend will go out together to do that. And it's a period of time where the entire time I'm kind of like, I'm all tensed up because I'm more worried about what's going to happen to her, but I can't catch a bobcat by myself. It's going to take at least
You can't, you're Superwoman.
Usually you need somebody distracting the bobcat on the front end while the other person is sneaking up behind them and netting them. Because even when they've got broken legs, they can run like nothing you've ever seen. They can swim like nothing you've ever seen, too. Oh, my gosh. I have leaped into so many rivers and lakes and other things after bobcats who had jumped into the water.
I can 100% say I cannot relate to what you're saying, but I love it. I don't know how you do it.
Oh, gosh. There's so many times that I'm just alligators. I am so fearful of alligators. And it's like I leap into these murky ponds and things. And it's like, I just know I'm going to step on some alligator going after this bobcat.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I didn't know that you did that. I love that we're going there because I had no idea. That is so incredible. And so I guess maybe those threats and that hate and that trepidation of going out in public isn't from the show at all. It's from the years of being targeted because you were trying to do the right thing. And that seems to be a theme in your life.
I was always that way as a kid, though. I mean, as soon as I had the opportunity to be by myself, I would. We worked hard as kids, and my parents worked extremely hard, and we worked in the family businesses, whether it was my father being a private detective and I'd be on stakeouts with him, or when he had a lawn care business, and as soon as we got out of school, I'd be riding lawnmowers until we got till we ran out of light, and we had a store and we ran the store. But anytime that I ever had to myself, I would just go walking alone just to be entirely by myself. That's where I find my joy and my peace, is in being alone. And I've always been that way from as far back as I can remember.
As I'm thinking that it makes a lot of sense from some of the stories that I've heard you say, I've caught a little bit about your background from growing up and then being alone. And I don't know if it was on the run. Can you, not on the run, but I don't know exactly how to say it.
On the street.
Yes. So with you at such a young age, being on the street and having to take care of yourself, and like you said, you're a self-proclaimed hermit. How did you feel like you had to raise yourself? What were the struggles that you had to face because of that situation that you went through as a child?
You had probably heard in some of the rooms that I have talked about being raped when I was 14 years old by 3 men, and feeling like I was no longer worthy as a woman. And in my family, which was a very fundamentally Christian family, they gave me the impression that if anything happened to a woman, it was her fault. And so I carried that with me. I didn't tell my parents about it, and I left home at the age of 15. And so at the age of 15, living on the street, I would sleep under cars or behind dumpsters or anywhere that I could be where I could not be molested in the middle of the night. And I had to always be kind of, aware of my surroundings, even when I was sleeping, in case somebody came out and started their car and needed to get out from under it before they rolled over me with a wheel. So it was a really nerve-wracking time. But again, I felt like even though I was going through all of that trauma of trying to stay alive and eating out of dumpsters and working sometimes as many as 3 jobs at a time, I was serving liquor, even though I was underage. I couldn't even drink liquor, but I did start drinking, but I wasn't legally old enough. And so I had to keep moving from job to job because I looked a lot older, but I couldn't prove my age. I couldn't show anybody any of my ID. And so it caused me to become self-reliant and to realize exactly what I could bear. And during that period of time, I was in a very abusive relationship with a man that had gone AWOL from the Army. And I just, one night after I'd been, I think it was probably about 3:00 in the morning, as we had closed down one of the night places where I worked, I remember standing there looking out over the Canal River. It was up on the top floor of, I think it was like the Holiday Inn or some hotel there. And the lights from the candles on the tables were all flickering in the glass windows, and kind of, how when a light flickers in a window and you can see it like expanded out forever. And so I'm looking and I'm seeing like all of those lights everywhere. And I'm listening to, was it Debbie Boone that did You Light Up My Life?
I love that song.
Beautiful song. And I'm listening to that and I'm just feeling all melancholy, and I had to walk to and from work, so I left, shut the whole place down, went and was walking home, and I had to walk across the Kanawha Bridge. And as I was coming up on the bridge, I thought, I just don't want to go home, because I know that this man is going to beat the living hell out of me, and I just can't take another beating. And so I climbed up as high as I possibly could onto not the bridge part, but I don't know what you call that, the suspension part of it, and jumped, thinking that surely the fall would kill me, and it didn't. And I'm a good swimmer, so when you hit the water and you're a good swimmer, you just can't make yourself drown. I don't know if you've ever tried to drown yourself, but it's just not possible. And so as I'm bobbing there in the water thinking, gosh, I can't even commit suicide, right, I hear this man from the bridge yell something to the effect of, wait, I'm going to save you, or something like that. And he leaps in after me, and it's this old drunk that had been sleeping under the bridge. He saw what had happened. He scrambled out there, and he couldn't swim worth a darn. And so I ended up having to haul him up out of the water. But it was a turning point in my life where I thought, he gave everything that he had, knowing he was probably going to die doing that. But here he had nothing to give, and he offered his life to save me. And I was so touched by that. I can't tell you how much that impressed me. And so it was like, I've got a whole lot more going on for me than this guy has going on for him. And I need to appreciate what I can do. And so I came back and stayed in that relationship long enough to get the guy back to his mother in Tampa, Florida, and then moved on to actually getting married when I was 17 and having my daughter when I was 19. And all the while feeling like I was being chased by the devil, because I felt like there was so much that I needed to do with my life. And what I thought it was rescuing domestic cats and kittens from being killed in shelters. But I knew that was going to be a huge undertaking and very expensive. And so I continued to work 2 and 3 jobs and just socked away money as best I could. And then started investing in real estate when it was in 1984, and built up a real estate business that then gave me the luxury of being able to give back. And it was during that period of trying to give back that I discovered this whole issue with exotic cats, and very naively thought, well, I can fix that. Well, here we are 30 years later. I'm still trying to fix that, but I'm getting really, really close. That's my life in a nutshell.
I'm trying to contain myself because that was so beautifully said. I mean, a lot of the times when I speak to people on this level and they share things that have been so difficult in their lives. And I'm just letting you know, I never heard that story before. I didn't know.
Oh, really?
I didn't know. I must have heard a tail end of something, but that truly touched me. And it just reminds me of what I hear from so many people. It's that at that rock bottom, when you have that breakdown, so many people refer back to that as that's the moment that saved my life. That's the moment that made the biggest difference, when you're at that rock bottom. And that story you told just went an entire circle of that's what it seems like, your life's purpose, if it wasn't for that moment. It's just a beautiful story, and I'm so grateful that you shared it. And it leads me to my next question. Being at that rock bottom and having that happen to you, how did you, if you fast forward, how did you become the confident, fearless woman you are today from that woman that you were? What did you do? How did you get there?
I have adopted the favorite phrase that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And I think that there has just been one bit of evidence after another. There is even more than I can withstand, and I'm going to be stronger at the end of it. So it really has been an evolution, because I started out so shy and so ill-equipped for this world, being raised in this very sheltered environment, and then all of a sudden thrust out onto the streets and finding out how people really are and how things really work and how scary everything can be. But by dealing with each of those little fears and those little setbacks along the way, I think it has just enabled me over the years to take on bigger and bigger challenges. And I'm thankful for them, because I believe, like you just said, that it's only when you hit rock bottom that you have no other alternative than to pick yourself up and do something better. And so I think that each one of those is an opportunity to become a better person and to become better centered in your beliefs. And my personal belief is that everything, no matter how horrible, everything is happening exactly as it should, and that it's leading us all to a higher level of enlightenment together. And so if that's your underlying belief, then you just don't have any kind of trepidation about what's coming down the pike. You know you can handle it because you know you're going to find what the good thing was in that.
It's hard for me to even ask you this question, but it's vulnerable. Can you remember something that someone said or something that you read that you were just that? What was the worst thing someone could have said to you, and that you heard after the Tiger King aired?
I think the worst, I don't know that it was any individual person, but I think that the overall belief that people had that I had been a homewrecker who had broken up a family and a marriage, and that I had targeted as a gold digger this millionaire in order to separate him from his family and separate him from his money, and then who ultimately killed him. I think that is the hardest thing for me to deal with, is the belief that people have, because that's the narrative they were fed in Tiger King, when in fact, Don and I met in 1981. We were together until 1991 before his wife decided she wanted to marry somebody else. Don had dozens of girlfriends, according to Gladys. I knew about a few of them. I didn't know there was 24. I think she said he had. It was like,
oh my
well,
God.
He was busy, because I didn't know that. But still, I mean, she knew he had all of these girlfriends, and throughout all that time, and I had never asked him to leave her, even though I was married and then I was single, but still, I believed in marriage and I did not want to come between them. And so I did everything that I could to not be discovered by her. And, you know, when I first met him, he told me he was Bob Martin, that he was somebody else, not Don Lewis, and that he had left his wife. And so by the time I found out different, it was like 3 years later, I'm already in love with this guy and I can't leave him. But did actually on several occasions when he said that he wanted to go back to his wife, I was like, that's fine. I'll back out of your life. I'll stay gone. And then he'd come back and say it didn't work out. Well, I believe that. And yet turns out those were other girlfriends he was working things out with, not his wife. And we started the real estate business in 1984. He couldn't read or write past about a first grade level. I was the person who built our real estate business. And yet back in the 80s, you're probably not old enough to remember this, but back in the 80s, a woman there's no way I could walk into a bank and say, I want to buy your bad mortgages. They just weren't going to deal with a woman. So I made up a business card, and it was the initial C for Carole. My last name was Stairs, so it was C Stairs Investments. And I would give that to everybody, and I told them that I worked for this man named Mr. Stairs, and that he had asked me to come to the bank and check out these mortgages and offer them cash for the mortgages. And then I would do all of these transactions this way, to the point that when Don and I got married in 1991, everybody thought he was Mr. Stairs because they didn't know him from anybody.
You were Mr. Stairs.
I was Mr. Stairs. But, you know, people wanted to believe that the man was in charge and that the man built the business. And the most he did was ride around in the car with me to look at some of the properties. He didn't do any of the research or the title searches or the foreclosures or the evictions or any of those things. And, you know, that and that's in the public record. Anybody can go down to the public record and see that I was the person doing this buying and selling. But if you think about it, if I'm the person with the money and I'm the person who's capable of making the money, why on earth would I kill my husband? I didn't need to. I could divorce him. I could have half of the business. I could build the business right back up, which is what I did after the conservatorship. And so, you know, if people knew me at all, they would have known that at least. But I was in love with him, even though we had this really weird, complex relationship where I knew about some of his girlfriends anyway, and I was tolerant of that. I just felt like that's the way men are. In fact, when my daughter was getting married, I wrote a book for her, a little book saying, you know, you need to know now, this is the way men are, and you need to either accept that this is probably going to happen to you at some time. He's going to have girls throwing themselves at him because he was a veterinarian and he was very handsome. And I said, you've got to be okay with that because that's the way men are. And so thankfully that was not the case with her, and they ended up divorced, but not because of that. So, you know, we had that kind of a relationship that was just okay for both of us. It wasn't the reason to divorce each other. We were madly in love with each other. And I was the only person, when I saw this dementia that was taking his ability to make good decisions, I was the person trying to get him to a doctor. I was the one taking him in for an MRI. I was the one that took him to the psychiatrist. I had set up an appointment for him to see an Alzheimer's specialist. And yet it was the people in Tiger King who were just robbing him blind, who said, oh, he didn't have dementia, and telling him he didn't have dementia, so that he was fighting me every step of the way to get him the help that he needed. And then feeling like I failed him because I couldn't keep track of him every waking hour, and he got away from me that one morning, and I hadn't seen him since. And so I always feel guilty that when I saw him in the doorway that morning saying that he was leaving, I felt like, oh my God, I need to get somebody to just follow him, stay with him. We had a guy named Kimi that worked for us, and we always tried to make sure somebody was with him so that he didn't get into trouble with the cats, mostly because he would do stupid things with the cats, like cut holes in the cages and let them loose. And so that one morning when he headed out the door and I was just so tired, I laid my head back down on the pillow and fell asleep. I felt like I failed him then. And that has just haunted me since 1997. But then to have people say that I was the person responsible for his disappearance and for whatever ended up happening to him, it's like they don't have any idea what was going on in our lives to have said that.
I know. If it were me, I would be wanting every day to let everybody know, this is me. This is who I really am. How dare you think this of me? Don't you realize it's like I would want to pull my hair out every day with what you just said? I've never heard you say that before. And it takes such a strong woman to not have to prove every second of the day of your life, your innocence, when you just, if you really knew me, you would know that this is ridiculous. You really knew that this is what was going on in my life. I'm the breadwinner. I was trying to keep everything together, and it's just so sad and so disgusting. And I just love this segment. I just love this segment because it brings tears to my eyes, and it makes me just want to put that segment on every single TV, on every single news channel. Because if they were to see who I'm seeing right now, it's done. It's just done. I'm so sorry. So
I'm sorry that this is having such a negative impact.
No, it's not negative at all. It's not negative at all. It's real. And I'm so happy that you even agreed to do this sort of interview, because I'm really getting to know who you are. And I just want people to see and know that you're doing what you are led to do. You are living a purpose-driven life, and nothing's going to stop you. And I would just love to ask you, is there some sort of closure that you could get with the producers, with everything that you went through these past few years? What would be the best kind of closure for you? To just wrap it up with a bow and say, I went through this crap and it's over now? What could they do to make you have closure?
I don't think they could do anything to give me closure, because the closure really needs to come from finding out what happened to Don. And that was the one thing that, you know, with all of the publicity that came from Tiger King and all of the people thinking that I killed Don, at least it had people thinking about this again and looking into things again. And the sheriff's office was looking into stuff again. And so that gave me hope that maybe we would find out what really did happen. Until I know that, then I really don't have any closure. There's nothing that anybody else could say or do that could give me closure other than to know what really happened to Don.
I understand that. And it leads me to another thing that I think I remember hearing you say, because I'm sure people ask you, do you regret doing the show? But I think because you're such a purpose-driven person, it brought such a light to what was going on in the cat world and how exploited that they were. And it gave Big Cat Rescue a huge name. So is that the right answer? Is there something else behind it? Is there a part of you that regrets doing the show and the way that it was handled? Or do you really think that the exposure was something that was a huge positive that you would do it again the same way?
Well, it depends on who you ask that question, because if you ask me, I would absolutely do it again, even if I knew that they were going to absolutely trash my character and try to assassinate it. I would still go through it again. As hard as all of that was on my family, I feel like we all survived it. And so I would put everybody through it again just to be able to get the word out there about what's going on with these cats. But my husband, if you ask him, he would tell you absolutely. He would never have trusted them if he knew that this was going to happen.
It's like what we were talking about before. It's like the people around you that love you, they'll do anything to protect you. So I know that you have to go, and I want to just end with something that's been on my mind, and I'm sure it's going to be on the listeners' minds as we wrap this up. But how do you feel about Joe Exotic? And not just how do you feel about him. If he were sitting where I'm sitting right now, and you could have an open dialogue, what would you say to him, and what would you want him to say to you?
The whole narrative of there being this feud between us was just such a ridiculous thing, because I've never even spoken to him. And if I were to speak to him, I would tell him the same thing that I have said to the media in the hopes that he would heed it. When he was seeking a pardon, what my husband and I had both said in separate interviews to different organizations, different news outlets, was that if Joe really wanted a pardon or a reduced sentence, then what he needs to do is show that he's remorseful for what he's done in such a way, not just say I'm sad about it, but actually do something about it. And so I had said that if he were to work with us on our federal bill to say, look, I'm Joe Exotic. I used to breed all these cats. I saw the light. I realized they don't belong in cages, and I want this federal bill to ban the cub petting and to phase out private possession. If he were to do that and were to work with law enforcement, the guy that said he was the model for Scarface in Tiger King, Mario Tabro, he was sentenced to over 100 years for his cocaine dealings. And he got off in 12 because he worked with the government to bring down bigger fish. Well, Joe's just the smallest fish in that barrel. He knows all of the bigger fish in that industry, and I think he knows where the bodies are buried. Mm-hmm. I think he knows how to bring them to justice. And so if he were willing to work with law enforcement to put those far more dangerous people than he is, he was dangerous enough trying to kill me so many times, but I think the other people who shared that same desire to have me killed and yet were smarter and didn't talk about it as much as he did, those are the really dangerous ones. And I think they belong in jail. And I think he could do that. And so he just recently said that he called my bluff by saying that he was going to support the federal bill. But then he said, but it can't ban cub petting and it can't phase out private possession. And it's like, those are the only two things my bill does. You didn't call my bluff. You didn't get it. What you have to do is pass the bill and put these other guys behind bars. So if he were to really, do that and really have a change of heart, then I think that he should get a reduced sentence, and I would be in favor of that. But if he's not willing to actually do the things that he's saying, he shouldn't be able to get off on just lying. He should have to actually do it. But as far as how I really feel about him, I don't feel harshly toward anybody. I hate the abuse that is inflicted on these animals, but I don't hate the abusers. I think probably every one of them has some horrible, sad story that has led them to be who they are. And I think they're going to all ultimately learn from their actions, from the karma that comes around in their life, to be better people eventually. We may have to reincarnate a few more times on some of them, but I think eventually they'll get there, and that we're all on that path. So I don't hold anything against anyone personally.
And I believe that because it's just so in line with everything that you've said tonight and everything I've heard from you. I just so grateful to have the pleasure of getting to know you on a deeper level. And I just want to know, how can people connect with you? How can we support you? How can we support Big Cat Rescue and Carole Baskin?
For me, the biggest thing that we can do is end the cub petting. That's what's driving probably 95% of the abuse. That's what's creating the legal smokescreen, all these cats being dumped into private hands or into the trade for their parts. All of that legal smokescreen is creating a opportunity for illegal poaching of tigers in the wild, because people will always want the premium product. It's always going to be cheaper to shoot a tiger than to raise one for 5 years before you take its teeth and its skin and its bones. And so what people can do is, if they're in the U.S., they can go to bigcatact.com, and we make it really easy. They just type in their name and address, and it will look up who your member of Congress is and give you a little pre-formed letter that you can send as an email or a tweet or a little script that you can actually read if you call them, which is the most important thing people can do, is to make the call. And if they don't feel like they know the situation well enough, if they go to cubtruth.com, there are some explainer videos there, really entertaining ones, that will get you ready to make that call. So that's the most important thing that people can do, is to end the abuse so that places like mine don't have to exist. We shouldn't have to be rescuing big cats from horrible situations. We should just end the horrible situations.
Couldn't think of a better sentence to end on. I really couldn't.